Bruce Orr left a career in law enforcement to become a published author. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, he sits down with me one-on-one to talk about his latest book, Lost in Legend. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Bruce, it is so good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I appreciate this. You know, you actually sent me a Facebook message a couple of weeks ago. You said this: "Good evening, sir. As October and Halloween approaches, I did not know if you were interested in the legends and folklore, ghost tales of the Low Country. I'm a local author, historian, and researcher. My Facebook page is Lost in Legend. If you're interested in some background, thanks." Let me go back to what you just said to me on Facebook, because when I did my research, it was interesting to me who you are. It says this: Bruce Orr is retired criminal investigator turned author. After retiring, Mr. Orr combined his love for investigation and research with his love for history and writing. What?
That's a big step. Lost in Legend, again, like you said, I was a criminal investigator.
Yes.
And Lost in Legend has a lot more to do with just ghosts. I have a love for folklore, of course, with ghosts and preservation of it in history, but also as a kid, I loved to read.
Oh, good.
Now, part of that is the preservation of the Lost in Legend is a preservation of history, but also as an investigator, criminal investigator, I was assigned to the juvenile division.
Okay.
And dealing with juvenile crime, I found out that about 85% of any juvenile that is involved in a criminal aspect in the state, in this country, is functional illiterate. They can read a stop sign, but they can't read a paper. So part of this is preservation of history, but it's also getting somebody interested in promoting literature. When I was a kid, my escape was reading. I escaped through reading. I escaped through all the ghost tales and the folklore and the legends, and loved the history and fell in love with it. In 2010, I went with a friend of mine who was a scuba diving instructor. He was certifying some kids in Florida. And these were local kids we took to Florida. I was a safety diver, and we sat around the campfire at nights and told ghost stories, and none of the kids knew the stories that we grew up with.
Wow.
So part of Lost in Legend became preserving these ghost tales and folklore and everything else for future generations.
And let me go to what you just said, Lost in Legend, because you have this Facebook page as far as the cover photo, and I like this. It says this: "Never let the facts get lost in the legend." Let me just ask the obvious: what are the facts?
A lot of times, a ghost tale or a legend will start out, it's almost like that game of telephone you played as a kid. One person says something and adds it, and by the time you get 200 years down the road, it's got a lot of murkiness. You don't know what's fact or fiction.
Right.
But there are great places like where we're sitting here today, in the South Carolina Historical Society, many different areas that you can do research. And my push is, you've heard the same ghost tales over and over again, but what I like to do with Lost in Legend is put flesh behind the phantom.
Mm-hmm.
These people were they existed, they were real. And when you start looking into their history, you might find out there's a little bit more to the story that's a little bit more interesting than just a ghost tale.
Yeah. And let me go to September 28th. You said the following on Facebook. You said this, quote: "Book 5. I'm finally cleared by my new publisher to announce that Book 5 is in the final stages of editing and will be released in early 2018. I'm also allowed to release the cover design. I picked this photo in honor of my late mother, who loved the tale of Alice B. Lane, Flag." Book 5. What is the biggest difference between Book 1 and Book 5 in your mind?
Book 1, I always had an interest in folklore and legends and the paranormal aspect of things as a kid. But Book 1, I decided to write a true crime story based off of a ghost tale that involved Lavinia Fisher in Charleston here. She was accused of being the first female serial killer executed in America. And she and her husband were housed in the old city jail down here on Magazine Street, and they were executed on Lime Street. They were hanged together in 1820. Basically what I did from that aspect, being a former detective, I was a homicide detective at one point. I always loved the story. And I began to look into it as a true crime version. So the first book was basically a true crime version of a ghost tale. Then I get a phone call one night from a fellow named Joe Taglieri, who was a producer with Ghost Adventures. And they wanted to use the book on the 2011 season finale, and after that, I like ghosts a lot. And so I consulted for different ghost shows. But the very first book started out as a true crime story and kind of strayed away from the ghost legends. And now this fifth book is straight ghost legends of the coast of South Carolina, Beaufort, Charleston, different ports in South Carolina, and different stories on and out and about in the waters of South Carolina. So it kind of changed a little bit.
If your late mother were able to read this book right now, what would she say?
She loved ghost tales. We grew up with ghost tales from my grandmother's side of the family. My mother's side, my grandmother, was a great ghost teller, my uncle. And Mom always loved the stories. And she loved the story of Alice Flagg out of Pawleys Island. That was one of her favorites. So that is the tomb, or the grave of Alice Flagg is the cover of the new book, and that was in her honor. But she loved this, and she was around. She lived long enough to see the first few books published, and got to know that I was doing this. So it's a great thing.
It really is. You talk about most of the juveniles that you had to really deal with as law enforcement official. Is writing this book a part of you trying to help give back to the community?
It is. I was fortunate in the time that I grew up with. We didn't have so much social media.
Yeah.
You got outside and you ran around with your friends in the neighborhood. You threw rocks at each other.
Yeah, right.
You chased crawdads in ditches, and that was your fun. You didn't have all this ability to sit down and talk to your friend in Japan through social media. And we've kind of lost that. I mean, I've sat at the table and watched my own kids sit across from each other and text each other instead of talking.
Wow.
And we've lost that. And part of this is getting people, again, interested in folklore and legends. There's a lot of, as we all know, there's a lot of bad things that happen in history, and erasing them is not going to change things. We've got to learn from them so we don't repeat the same mistakes. And in order to go forward and move forward and do great things as a nation and as individuals, as part of this nation, you've got to know the mistakes that were made in the past, not to repeat them. And history has there's an old saying, history often repeats itself, and that's unfortunate. We don't want to go backwards. We want to keep moving forwards in unity. And I think by covertly hiding a history lesson in a ghost tale, something that young people are interested in, then they might be able to tell you that, for instance, there was a headless ghost at the Battle of Quinby Creek over in Berkeley County, but that's only one paragraph out of 3 pages of Revolutionary history involving Francis Marion. And it's another thing where you can talk about the Simbi water spirits that were brought over through Gullah culture. But as a diver, I'm able to go dive and pick up pieces of pottery that the last time somebody held them, they were appeasing this evil spirit that's in the legend. So I can tell you a story about the Simbi water spirits, and Gullah culture and the slave culture appeasing the spirits, throwing these pieces of pottery in there. But when I put that piece of pottery in your hand, and you're probably the third person that held it since the person on the bank threw it in there for the story, then history becomes real. It becomes tangible. I can't bring you a ghost in here, but I can bring you a part of history. And I often go into schools. I often work with teachers. I'm involved with the Berkeley County Literacy Council. I'm involved with a lot of different programs like that, and just seeing the look on children's face when you bring in a piece of pottery that somebody held several hundred years ago, or you bring in a shark's tooth that's 5.5 inches long, and I'm the first person that's touched it in 30 million years, and they're now holding in their hand. It's amazing. History comes to life, and you see the interest in it, and I hope it spurs them on to where they start picking up books, they start looking, researching, and trying to do some more on their own.
Okay, you talk about the book. Let me go back to Lost and Legend. If you were to go and sit in the classroom somewhere in Berkeley County, where would you go to as far as your favorite chapter?
My favorite chapter is the way things, as far as Lost and Legend itself, the company, the business. It started out as basically a hobby, and it turned into a business.
Wow.
My favorite chapter is the fact that I started out back in 2010 with kids not knowing these tales, and as of last year I was invited to Merrington Middle School because one of the teachers there at the School of the Arts had incorporated all the ghost tales of the local communities, and they put on a play. They put on a production involving all these local ghost tales that they used my book from to do this, to put this on. And it was an honor to sit there because what I'd worked so hard for had come full circle. I wanted the young people to remember these stories and to love these stories like I did, and they did. And Marrington School of the Arts actually put on a performance, and it was wonderful. It came full circle in 7 years that they're actually back in the schools. The books are used in the classrooms to teach the kids our local history and our local legends and folklore. And of course, everybody loves a good scare. So, everybody loves a good ghost tale, and it's great.
You're right about that. Oh gosh, let me talk to you about your future. And I know this might be a crazy question, but if you were to write another book about your future, what would the title be?
Lost and Legends going in so many different directions. We kind of joke about it. Some people call me a ghost hunter. I'm not really a ghost hunter. Some of my field notes on Lavinia Fisher and all are actually housed in the South Carolina Historical Society. So they've been donated. So
Yes.
there are things like that it's just progressed. I've incorporated diving into it. I've been involved in some of the projects with the state of South Carolina, some of our own that we've been involved with Lost and Legend. But where it goes now, there's no telling. This thing snowballed so greatly since I started it back in 2010. I wouldn't even know where to go. I guess the title would probably be, hold on a second, let me catch my breath. It would probably be where it goes. So that would probably be the title of it. Give me just a second.
Yeah.
Like I did coming up these stairs here to talk to you.
That's right. Sorry about that.
I'm not as young as I used to be.
I know, right? Ooh. And you talk about 2010 a lot. Okay, let me talk to you personally, because I want to know this. Who is Bruce Orr now versus 2010 when you first started this?
I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of history. I've learned not to take things for granted in legends, as we talked about earlier. I've also learned to be a little bit more patient. Again, when you're researching things, it takes time and it takes patience.
Sure.
And everybody can tell the same ghost story over and over and over again. It takes a little more patience to, again, like I said, put flesh to the fandom. Go and find the historic documents that make these people real, that that prove that these people actually did exist. And they had families and they had communities. And it kind of makes me a little more respectful of the time that I have here on the planet, the family and friends and the contacts that I make. And you need to be thankful for it, because you don't know how long or how short your time is on this planet.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of dealing with this. A good for instance of that was I got involved with a project identifying a soldier's diary from the Civil War. It had a lot of hints in it, but it did not have his name anywhere in it. And actually, I was able to determine who, with some help from some friends here, determine who it was. And the point I'm making with that, though, is as I'm reading this diary, I know the history of where he's marching to. I know what he's getting ready to head to. And it's like playing God. You're reading a day-by-day account, knowing he's marching to this battle where he may actually die. So it gives you a surreal perspective of things when you're dealing with these people, that you know how they ended up, how they died, their deaths, and whether or not they're ghosts. That's an open interpretation.
Sure.
But it brings it home the fact that, we only have a limited amount of time here, and to make the most of it, make the best of it, make your friendships, and work together. There's too many people working apart these days.
You're right about that.
So,
Well, Bruce Orr, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
thank you. I appreciate your contact and appreciate the friendship. And by the way, I hear you got a birthday.
That's coming Sunday. Yes,
I got something for you, though. I don't.
Oh, Lord. Let's see this. Thank you.
All right, let me find it.
Okay.
This would be the first book, 6 Miles to Charleston,
Wow.
about Lavinia Fisher. So, happy birthday. I'm not going to come and be empty-handed, so I want to make sure I've got you a copy.
I appreciate this, Bruce.
No problem.
I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
likewise.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was good. Thank you.